Hello and welcome to this first video demonstrating various different things. This time I'm going to be demonstrating the Seymour Duncan pickups, the 59 custom hybrid, which I have here in the bridge, and the Jazz, which a lot of people already know about, in the neck. What is very unique about this particular guitar is that I have taken a LTD H100 FM with acanthus body, maple neck, and rosewood fingerboard, and taken the original alpha pots out, put some CTS Concentric pots in. They're A-class, 500K, 500K each, and gave myself coil split without switches. The switch that I have here is a typical three-way switch just for selecting either bridge only, neck only, or both. And I use both mainly because of the option now that I have to choose any of the four single coils without having to select them individually. I can blend in any amount that I want, though I do have to blend in quite a bit for it to be noticeable. I'm not going to go into the wiring specifics. Let's just say this one is wired in parallel instead of series, because in order to get this without going out of phase or half out of phase, that's what I had to do. If you wire it like you would with typical series humbucker wiring, when you turned both the north and south on a particular pickup, say the neck, you would go out of phase with them both at 100%. So I had to wire them in parallel to avoid that, and also had to do a very different kind of wiring for volume control, in that your typical wiring for volume control would actually lead to bleeding through to all the different pots, and you would end up with the with having to have each of them on just a little bit in order to control any of them at various different volumes other than that initial 1 or 2%. Now, I bet you're wondering, what are the tones like? What are the combinations that are possible with this? Because normally with push-pull pots or switches, you only have one of the coils available when you split it out. In this case, you have all four coils available in any combination outside of anything that would have to do with going out of phase or going into series for the individual ones. As I said, that's not an option. I will, however, be modding this same guitar very soon with Seymour Duncan Triple Shot rings, so that I have not only the available options already, but also can go into series and work on various other options. Now, as far as the tones, it's quite simple. This is the 59 custom hybrid with both activated. By the way, I'm using a very British sounding amp, kind of like the Marshalls. It's in the plexi jump mode. That's your typical parallel wiring sound. Now to get single coil tone, south bridge only. Fuller tone, a little bit more brittle and bright, but it's a very tight and punchy sound if you add a little bit more drive, which I'm going to demonstrate later when I go into the overdrives. Now if I select the slug coil north bridge option here, you'll notice it gets a little bit darker, not quite as brittle, still twangy. One thing you do notice with all three of these options is that Seymour Duncan has appropriately voiced these pickups so that they are quite articulate and very dynamic, and that they pick up any variance in your pick articulation. Like if you're just playing very lightly, or if you're picking fairly heavily, light, heavy. Most cheap pickups can do this, but not quite as well with anywhere near as much clarity. You'll notice most cheap stock pickups can't get that nice single coil full range tone out of it. Even when you're in parallel mode, which gives you a slightly thinner tone than with series. Series kind of compresses the tone a little bit before getting sent back out. Parallel, on this other hand here, is quite single coil and thinner sounding, but fuller. As you can hear, it's very tight. It doesn't have a loose feel to, and it's not muddied or muted like with very low output pickups that aren't very clear. Usually your stock pickup. Now for the neck, which is of course, as I said, the jazz. This is full on, meaning both coils. As you notice, it's quite a lot warmer, a fatter sound, as some would say. Typical lead type tone that you would hear either in blues, jazz. A lot of rock uses it. You know, typical riffs like this are very, let's just say they fit this kind of pickup a lot better than your stock pickup. Yeah. Okay, now here's the piece de resistance of this whole mod. The ability to put it in the central position on the switch and choose any of the four that I want. Say, outer coils, the south bridge, and the north neck. normally only get on a Strat or fairly high-end Les Paul style guitars that utilize various switches and whatnot. Normally Les Pauls only come with a rhythm or lead switch at the top. Usually a custom option to get anything other than that. Fenders come with it stock usually. Now for the two inner coils, the north bridge and south neck. A little darker, a little tighter. We will have to control the bass and lower mid frequencies with appropriate equipment. As you notice, this is just straight tone going in through the amp. As you can tell, it's a little muddy, but an appropriate cab IR that has less low end and more mid-range will tighten it up. Say, like this, I'm going to go for the Roslyn Digital series and go for their Marshall 1960A number 2. And as you can see, I'm taking my time here because I have 2 amps for bigger sound here. Here we go. And now as you notice, it kind of tightens it up a little. Or a lot. Not bad. Really good for lead tones here. Though, of course, this is, unoverdriven lead. Something you only hear in jazz and some light blues. Alright, now we've done that. How about something a little less cliche? How about both north coils? Here we go. Turn those on. Turn the south ones off. Thick, but with enough, quote, thinness, unquote, to really be nice for rhythm. Say the lead guitarist has a very heavy-handed approach to his tone. This allows you to have that same sort of heavier tone, a thicker tone than you would normally have on rhythm, and yet still be able to punch through with an appropriate amount of EQing. And EQ it towards the mids and higher ranges more than the low than you would, say, with the lead. Because with a lead, you're going to want a little bit more low end, a little bit more mid. But not always. Very modern sort of tone to it, too. Now, for both south bridges. That'll be the 59 screw coil and the jazz slug coil. There we go. This is definitely appropriate for rhythm. Very twangy. quite tight, with enough looseness, quote unquote, where you would actually be able to play around with some rockabilly or surfer rock, stuff like that. Some modern country tones can be made with this. You also do some city blues. Oh, let me try that chord one more time. Yeah, there we go. Stevie Ray did it best, but there you go. You know, this wouldn't be too out of place, like I said, rockabilly or anything like that. But anything with a thicker, heavier lead tone, modern rock, even in some of the 60s, 70s rock, 80s rock, wouldn't really benefit from this as much. But Johnny Cash tones, stuff like that, kind of, but with a modern twist to it. And there you go. That's all your combinations right there, with the exception of one, and that is all of them turned on all at once. Basically, both parallel wirings on at the same time, and you get this tone. It's got a nice humbucking mode to it, like some of the others did, if you noticed. Very thick, but clear. But it definitely drives the amp a little more. Not necessarily more signal, but you've got more darkness in it than you would have if you just had one or the other. So I guess you could say it's driving, the darker part of it are being driven out more, and thus it's more prominent in the mix. That's primarily because the Jazz has a little bit hotter signal than the 59 Custom Hybrid does. But at the same time, anytime you put any sort of dark tone in with something that's twangy, it's going to override it just a little bit. Mainly just due to the fact that, well, in the end, the mind really just tends to pick up on lower frequencies better than it does anything in the mid to high range frequency. As far as when you're hearing a mix of frequencies, you're going to notice that the very low end and the very high end more. And more so for the low end. But in the end, it's very fun tone to work with here. And as far as anybody wants to try and figure out how to make this mod, just make sure that you don't do your typical volume wiring for any of this, because in the end, you will end up with bleeding through to all your knobs and have some weird side effects. Contact the guys over at Seymour Duncan, either the forums or email the pros. They'll help you out, give you a good schematic usually, or try guitarelectronics.com. They have hundreds of schematics available for all different types of various things that you could ever imagine. My particular mod is not on either one of those, but that's because this is a very novel way to do things. Usually you would rather switch to your preferred pickup or mix thereof. Here, I've just used pots for it. Some overdrive tones, how about that? Alright, here we go. After a jump cut here, you can see that I have some ready-made overdrive. As you notice, it's still clear. It's not muddy. It's because I'm not going for maximum gain through the clean channel. This is the modern channel on a rectified amp. You know what I'm saying? In addition to all of that, you get clarity and low end chug. Anyway, this is right now going to be the bridge only. So we got bridge south, which is 59 again. And now for the custom coil, slug coil. Sounds just like a single coil variant of the custom. Beautiful. Now for the South Jazz in the neck here. Tight and punchy. And now for the darker, slightly muddy tone of the North neck here with the Jazz. I'm not using a rectifier style cabinet. I'm using a cab IR from Roslyn Digital called the 1960A Marshall, basically. Cleans the mud up at the bottom. This bottom end here can get fairly muddy with the Jazz. If you use a very bottom heavy cab IR or actual cab. My particular Behringer cab here is basically made for the Vampire amp line, which I have it running through, but only through the auxiliary input on the back, so I can use my computer and some VSTs amps and effects. All this is just straight amp and cab IR. So as you can tell, these are very, very nice single coil overdriven tones. Here's the bridge with both coils activated in parallel. And here's the parallel tone for the Jazz with overdrive. As you can tell, it's quite made for that very thick lead tone. Kind of has a nice chug to it too. tight and punchy, despite the fact that it normally would have quite a muddy tone. The right cab and or the right EQ fixes that right up. And both of them on at the same time. What do you get? It's got a very bell-like tone to it there. Like a big, heavy metal bell there. Now, both norths, no south at all. And now for both souths, no north coils at all. Not quite as clear on note definition in this one, but it is there. Now, I'm going to leave you with one of the options I like best, which is the slug coil, the custom coil from the bridge, and both the jazz coils, which, by the way, you could also do this with the bridge. And you can, again, have any combination you want. As long as you realize it's in parallel wiring.